We are honored to have someone who is running for the United States Congress, not in my home state, okay, but in another state, in Wisconsin. And, we always think, what's the immediate need? Well, we have to look around us, and sometimes we even have to look outside of where we're at. And that's what we're doing here on the Erin Cruz Show. So tonight we're having Nick Polce, right? That's your last name, Polce?
Polce, yeah, Polce.
Polce. Oh, my bad. This is real on the Erin Cruz Show. Real live, raw and in person. But we do, and I'm so sorry for pronouncing it wrong. But
hey, that's okay. No, thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. So Nick, he's an interesting individual. I mean, he has a family. Okay, he's a real man in the real world. But his background is interesting. He is a veteran. We love having veterans on the show. After graduating college, okay, so he did go to college. He's an educated man. Nick enlisted in the Army. From 2002 to 2014, Nick was an active duty U.S. Army Special Forces soldier. Special Forces are more commonly called Green Berets because of their distinctive headgear. As a Green Beret, Nick deployed overseas 8 times. Let's count that. More than on one hand, 8 times. That's extensive, ladies and gentlemen. To a variety of different global hotspots where he served honorably and with distinction. And we will say that again, with distinction. There's a lot of merit that goes into that. Green Berets are warriors, teachers, mentors, and leaders. Above all else, they are problem solvers. We need problem solvers in Congress, ladies and gentlemen. After serving in the military, Nick began his life in the private sector as an entrepreneur, real estate investor, and part owner at a risk mitigation firm. We need risk mitigation in the U.S. Congress, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my goodness. So Nick decided to run for office to remove career politicians. So I'm hoping we hear that he doesn't want to become a career politician himself when we go into the interview. In contrast to career politicians, Nick's experiences in the military, government, and private sector will guide Nick in his position in the House of Representatives when he makes decisions that ultimately will affect all Americans. And that's another reason why me as a California, I am concerned about who gets elected to Congress, because quite frankly, what happens in Wisconsin affects what happens in California as it relates to the U.S. Congress. But let's get back to one of the most important parts of who Nick is. For the past 8 years, Nick has been happily married to his beautiful wife, Carla, and they welcomed their first child in 2016. His family lives in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And why do I say that's the most important part? He's a family man. He loves his family. He knows what the priorities are to everyday Americans, and it's so, so important. So welcome to the Erin Cruz Show, Nick. I have to ask you, in Wisconsin, how is it out there? How's the climate out there? Are you running as a Republican? How are the Republicans with you, and how are the people receiving you?
Well, first of all, Erin, thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here with you. Appreciate you, and thanks for the hard work you did out in California a few months ago out there running the machine.
Of course. We're not stopping. We're going for 2022. This is ongoing, but we're going to get out those career politicians, whether they like it or not.
Yes, we are. So as far as Wisconsin, we're in the 1st district, and for those of you that don't know, it's Speaker Ryan's district, and that's the seat that we're going to be taking once we win the primary, which is August 14th, and then the general election, which is November 6th.
That's coming up real quick.
It is. It absolutely is. I can't believe how fast it is. I mean, this week is going to be August, and then right now we're 2 weeks out. 2 weeks out from tomorrow, polls open.
Right.
So it's been one heck of a year. The message is resonating, and we're doing really well. We're excited, and we're just on our final push right now until we win on August 14th.
So now, I have to ask you, because we don't usually do, and we don't generally do primaries. How many Republicans are running in that particular race?
So I have one other major opponent, and I say major meaning legitimate. He was Paul Ryan's handpicked successor, and he's a corporate lawyer out of Janesville, which is on the west side of the district. So it's between him and I right now. There are 3 other individuals in the primary, but they're not don't have much name recognition, and 2 of them are just not legitimate as far as we're concerned here in Wisconsin.
Okay, and this other individual, is this the one that's rumored as being anti-Jew?
Well, he is one of the individuals running, yes.
Okay.
And he's made definitely some tweets and some Facebook postings.
Is that the one you were just referring to?
Right, which make you question if.
Well, I don't know then if he's legitimate, because I don't know that he should be running on a Republican platform, quite frankly. But I'm just going to tell you from my perspective, because I had the same situation here in California where we had not only an anti-Semite running. We had, as a Republican, we also had somebody else who infiltrated the party and wanted Medicare for all. Definitely not a Republican platform person. I mean, they don't ascribe to the same value systems as the Republicans do, right?
Right.
So I would say he's not a legitimate candidate as far as that's concerned. Perhaps financially he might be.
I agree, and he's not a legitimate candidate as far as I'm concerned. There was another individual, not him, that had jumped in later. That's he's making a decent attempt, but he doesn't have the name recognition or the campaign structure in place.
But what I hear is you have a strong platform that aligns with the Republican values. Less tax, less regulation, less government. And we want to hear about that. We want to hear about. We have a ton of problems in D.C., right? You have a ton of problems that people in your district in Wisconsin, the 1st District, want solved.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. So our platform is pretty simple. I consider myself a constitutional conservative. We have a document that outlines the role of elected officials in Congress. It outlines the role of what our federal government is and is not supposed to do.
Right.
And with that, you talked about term limits earlier. I don't think you go to Washington and spend a career. I think you work for a few years.
So you're in support of term limits?
Yes, and I believe 6 years is if I was king for a day, it's 6 years, and that's what we're gonna stick to. So if we earn 3 terms, or when we earn 3 terms, that'll be the end of it. In addition to that, the spending, we're spending way too much money. If you think about what happened in the GOP, Republican-controlled Congress, the last 2 times, we've had a 1.1 and a 1.3, a T with a trillion dollar spending.
Yes.
We've lost a party that's fiscally responsible. We've lost that recognition that it's our money. Yeah. And it should be remaining at the state and the local level.
See, I think of it this way. There's big lobby and there's big government, and they're almost the same. Right. Both are working against the American people and what's good and right for the country. So that's something that you're interested in hitting. And then where do you stand? Are you supportive? Are you supportive of the America First agenda in terms of what Trump is outlining for trade policy and other things, initiatives, as well as immigration? Can you touch on some of those issues?
Yes, and I am supportive of that because I think he's got the American interest first, right? Our individual Americans' interests first, as opposed to believing that you go to Washington and you need a whole lot of power there. I think he's doing a great job. So on immigration, absolutely. I support him in building the wall. And in addition to the walls, we have to fix and modify some of the current immigration law that's not working for us.
Closing loopholes.
Excuse me? I didn't hear you.
Closing some immigration loopholes. What do you think about putting a cap or bringing down the cap for legal immigrants?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the loopholes, we have that H-1B that we hear about often, where tech jobs are getting outsourced. And then as far as the family migration, changing that, or it's also we hear talked about as chain migration, modifying that so we're not able to sponsor. We need to modify that. We need to get rid of the visa lottery. And then also on the asylum law, that also has to be fixed because we have people taking advantage of that. Yes,
and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, we as a people are really generous, and I'm not sure about you, but my family were immigrants years and years and years ago, some of them in the very, very early 1800s. We are welcoming to those people who want to come here legally, using the process and following laws, but we need order.
Yes, absolutely right. And the bureaucracy right now is it takes so long for you to become come here legally, and so we have incentives to come here illegally. It should be flipped. It should be incentivizing us much like your family. My family, my great-grandfather earned his citizenship after World War I, fighting in the military. So there are ways to do it correctly. That's what we need to focus on.
Right, following the laws. Now, I do want to clarify, though, you just went into, and let me just back up, you just said that we need to flip it, make it easier for people to come in, but of course with caps, right?
Right. So what we have right now is if we want to incentivize legal, going
Right.
through the proper channels, and then we as an American people can decide how best to encourage and to incentivize individuals to come here legally, which
Right.
is setting certain limits. I mean, that's what a state and a country can and should be doing.
Right, right, exactly. So now, where do you stand? I'm gonna kind of go into another topic. Where do you stand in terms of regulation and small businesses? Your district where you live right now, what are some of the struggles that they're having relating to those issues, and what are some of your solutions?
So as a small business owner, one of the big things that you run into is up front is cash flow, right? You're trying to generate cash, and then you have this massive regulatory state that constantly is in tripping you up. Here's a way to think about it. Imagine you and I are in a barbershop, two-chair barbershop.
Right.
We're cutting hair, we're doing well. Then all of a sudden the federal government comes in and says, you have to have a lawyer and a CPA in that shop with you.
Right.
Well, no, there's no way now that we can pay for us and our families and then afford to pay for a lawyer and a CPA. So when you have the massive regulatory state that does those type of things, it
Right.
hurts small businesses. So that's an area that we need to focus on is getting rid of a lot of these regulations to allow individuals to prosper, and that's the key.
Right. Less government, less regulations. I just love it. So,
Yes.
Are you a church-going man?
Yes.
You are.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that faith are, our individual rights and liberties and freedoms, our inalienable rights is given by God and secured by the Constitution, and all of that. They're so important, and I hear a lot of people across the country, talk about hate and negativity and religion and abortion and all of these hot topics. And I don't want to get into the hot topics too much, but where do you stand in terms of, our liberties, ensuring that our freedoms are secure, and the rights of the unborn? I think that too much abuse has happened. We've seen the protests, we've seen the hate in DC as it relates to pro-choice movement, and people want action. I believe that the media uses it to divide people, uses it to divide people, and the Congress really has been soft on one side or the other, leaving the people kind of in a state of flux, if you will. Rather than making decisions and legislating one way or the other. Would you move towards a bill which was proposed, I think, a couple of months ago, which would put protections on the right to life for babies, 12 weeks or 20 weeks in utero?
Yeah, I do. I do support that. I'm pro-life. I mean, my little boy totally changed my wife and I's lives when he came along, and it took a long time for him to show up. And so that when he finally came and we were blessed with him, it was real at that point. We have a couple of those things here in Wisconsin. You have a pain-capable bill. You have the heartbeat bill at the state legislature level. And those things are things that Congress can take action on.
Right. So you do have those same issues. I think we're facing these same issues across the nation, and in DC, it just seems that they're so slow to really address the topics. And I'm so glad to hear that you're not gun shy on that, so to speak. That you'll face that challenge when it comes up, because what I saw, quite frankly, come through the pipeline in DC, and this is happening across the board, is you'll have 5 members introduce 5 different bills, and some will make it, some won't. But why can't we all come to an agreement on one bill, work towards it, and really get the job done for the American people and have the hard conversations? And nobody wants to do it, and the media gets everybody blown up. But we also have a Republican Congress who's weak. They aren't in there doing their jobs and addressing the issues and saying the things that they need to say to get the job done. And that's frustrating, and we need people in office who will take that action, and I'm glad you're willing to do so. Can I ask you one question? Where do you stand on the Second Amendment?
I support it. The Second Amendment is clear, and if we look back in time about why it came about, our founding fathers understood that weapons in the hands of the few lead to oppression of the many. And we saw that play out in the 20th century, right? The little black book of communism. And what's the first thing that a strong-armed or dictatorial government does? Is they go for the weapons from the citizens, they remove them, and then they give them to either their intelligence service or their military or their internal security service,
right,
which is then used to oppress.
Right. So do you stand with the Second Amendment as it's written in its simplest form?
Yes. Yeah, it's clear. It's clear about why we have it. We talk about the historical contents, and then we also individually, we have the right to protect ourselves. And if you choose to carry a weapon, you have that right. That's a right that we have as American citizens.
Now, thank you for addressing that. One of the interesting things that I decided to bring up in my campaign was I really was in support of being able to have the ability nationwide to carry your gun state to state, right?
Right.
Get rid of the barriers, almost like Obamacare. Get rid of Obamacare, be able to buy insurance across state lines, free up the system. But also the same thing with gun ownership. Of course, being mindful and respectful of each individual gun, state's gun law. Where do you stand on such a piece of legislation?
So the National Reciprocity Act, that's currently at the House of Representatives. I support that.
You support it?
I do. I support that. If you're going to, you should be able to bring your weapon across state lines. And one of the things, I've spoken to a lot of truckers and those in the transportation industry, and that's a big deal for them. That's real because of where they're moving their freight. A lot of times they're not going to the safest areas per se. And if they have a weapon, it'd be they feel a lot more safe. And then sometimes they're getting robbed, and that's a big deal to them in particular here in this district, and then others that I've talked to on other radio shows. Right.
And that being because these truckers, the long haul truckers, they go from state to state, and where you live, that could be very easily several states.
Right.
I mean, it is a real issue. So we're really, really glad to hear that about the reciprocity. See, this is why I don't say it. I'll let you say it.
National Reciprocity Act. And one other thing I'll add to that, because just south of us, is Illinois. And they have one of the most restrictive weapons policies in the whole country. Go ahead.
But here's the deal. There's nothing to say that bill or any such bill like it, if it's written well and simply enough, that it couldn't be accepted by the states and people can't adhere to that particular state's gun laws. I think that, people think that California is horrible. They have so many gun laws. You can't have a gun here. It's so restrictive. People have guns here. We have a lot of gun owners here. There are a lot of regulations around them. But if you're in a job such as, like you say, long-haul truck driver, your safety is at risk. And there isn't any reason really except for government bureaucracy, reason why you shouldn't be able to carry. So that's wonderful.
Great.
That's wonderful.
One thing I did want to ask you, though, and you talked about the gun laws in California. About a year or so ago, they came out with that bullet button. You remember them talking about that bullet button on the AR-15? And we're like scratching our head going, what the heck is a bullet button? But it was a little bit wild when they ended up describing that.
They're not real good on terminology, and you being a person from the military, you're probably going further than scratching your heads and thinking, what kind of morons do they have legislating over there? And I would have to agree with you. That's why I'm working here at the Erin Cruz Show. Do you know, I want to my aim is to have all the assembly, California State Assembly persons on this show and let them talk to the people. It's just so important. We have so many backwards people up there in California legislating. But you know what? If California goes, so goes the nation. And the things that we do here affect you over there in Wisconsin, because a lot of things pass through California, for example, goods, products, and other things that get to you eventually. We all suffer as a result of the craziness in Sacramento. So back to you, though, because this is what we really had you on for, to talk about your race. Your constituency, what are the top 3 issues that they're saying that they want solved? And what does your conversation look like with them when you offer them those solutions?
Right. So the number one thing I hear the most is the cost of healthcare, whether it's the premiums that you're paying, or it's the high deductible that you're coming out of cost, or Medicare is not covering certain things, or whatever the issue is. That's the number one thing I hear. And we got a lot of different ways that we can solve that problem, and all of it comes from removing a lot of power and control from the federal government and puts it back down to us individuals, where we're best able to make our own decisions with our time and our money, and especially with the decisions for our health care. Right.
So you're in support of repealing Obamacare, or repealing and replacing Obamacare entirely?
I'm sorry. I'm in support of repealing. When we lost, I should say the Republican Party, conservatives, when they bought into that repeal and replace, what they said was, we believe there should be a certain amount of federal government intervention in the healthcare market. And I fundamentally reject that. Because if you study the history of healthcare in this country, it's been intervention after intervention by the federal government, which has caused a massive disallocation of resources and has caused problems, because there's not a few smart people in Washington that can tell us 300 million people how to run our own lives. They don't have enough knowledge.
Right. So you're in full support of repealing. You know, it's interesting. When I thought about that entire process, the only thing that I thought about was that I thought was a plus. Okay, and this is a topic of conversation. It's interesting. Some people don't agree with it, but the only thing that I really super ultra agreed with was the fact that through your employer, if you have health care, you can buy health care. It's mandated that you also can buy, not your employer, but through your employer, you can buy health care insurance for your minor up to 26 years old. I just was thinking, well, what a brilliant idea that you can buy it through your employer for somebody else, as long as it's a nucleus family member. I just was wondering why they capped the age at 26. You know, the idea of free market systems and being able to buy insurance, whatever that insurance might be, whether it's through your employer or otherwise, I mean, the idea that government always wants to cap things, it just kind of blows my mind. What do you think in terms of like free market system and healthcare purchasing through your employer or outside of your employer?
I think the first step that we would need to take, and I absolutely agree with increasing freedom and allow individuals to decide how they're going to purchase their healthcare, whether in their employer or without their employer. The one thing that we can take action on in Congress to really start this process, in addition to repealing the Affordable Care Act, is changing the tax code. Because right now, almost all of us get our health insurance through our employer because of how the tax code is written. If we were to change that and we were to allow individuals to have the same types of tax treatment that an employer has on health insurance, now that totally opens up the marketplace and gives a lot more control to the individual to decide what type of plan they want to purchase. And this is a key. And we heard all about the Obamacare, the pre-existing conditions, right?
Right.
Why do we have that? Well, now we're talking generally. There's always going to be some small exceptions. But if I'm working for you, I purchase my health care through you. Now, if I either lose my job or I change jobs or I start my own business, I can't take that health insurance with me. So if I get sick or something happens in between me leaving you and picking up a new job, now I have that quote-unquote pre-existing condition. Right. If we switch that, so the individuals now were able to purchase that with the tax incentives, now it's not tied to their employer. So a lot of that pre-existing condition thing goes away because I have it already.
Right.
And that's a distinction.
Well, and I think the idea is that there are many reasons why they don't want to take away those, options and availabilities and the tax breaks and incentives that the employers get. And I've heard economists say and blame the insurance pools and the way they fund money and the way they, it's all about power, money, and control. There's a way to find a solution. We just need to have accurate information, real information, and be able to have people in there that will make the tough choices and make the decisions and free up the free market and do things like what you're explaining, is have those conversations and come to those solution points. And I look also at this Obamacare issue. It's going to be very similar to the Trump tax breaks, where it's a process. I don't think we stop at Trump's tax breaks. I think we have to go at it again and keep chiseling and keep freeing it up and see what's working and what's not in terms of the economy. And it's similar with healthcare. May not be an answer overnight, but I think that with good congressional members such as yourself, we'll get the job done, and we can do it systematically and really have people working for the American people, as opposed to big government, big healthcare, big interests, big lobby, and so forth. So now, you mentioned Obamacare as one of the top issues, and healthcare is one of the top issues. What are the other two top issues?
Oh, I also hear a lot with Social Security and the concern with what do we do about Social Security.
What is your solution for that?
Well, the first thing, and this is the thing that never gets talked about, the first thing is that we have to identify the problem, which is we've had elected officials for decades spending excess money from Social Security. So we think you and I working, or you spend your life working, the money comes out of your paycheck and goes to Social Security. We're expecting that money to stay there. What's happening, though, is, so that when we retire, right, what's happening, though, is that money's going to Social Security and getting sent out to the recipients, whether on disability or on retirement. Whatever's left now, our elected officials are then sweeping into the general revenue and spending. And that's a problem. That's the reason why we're running into the problems that you hear in the news a lot of being unfunded or potentially not being solvent in a couple more years. So that's the number one step, is to stop spending and identifying the problem, which is the career politicians spending your Social Security money.
So you really want to have a good look at the inside picture, because it's easy for us to say on the outside, but you have to get in there, be able to see everything that's been going on, have those conversations, be completely read in, and know what's behind the curtain, so to speak, to be able to fix that problem. Because I don't even think that that's just really a legislative issue. I think it's a functional issue, and either manipulation or perversion by the Congress and other certain parties. They're not getting the job done, and why not? That's
exactly
kind of the way I look
exactly. And the why not is what I see is that because you want to remain in power, you want to remain for a career, and so if you solve problems,
right,
why do we send you back? Well, we need 2 more years. I need 2 more years. I need 2 more years, and this is what happens. That whole I don't really like this term, but the whole kicking the can down the road. I mean, that's what we're seeing.
I mean, call it what it is. Everybody can relate to that idea, and I think it's just true. The can has been kicked. I mean, how long have we had a Republican Congress, House and Senate, and a president now, and Obamacare hasn't been repealed?
Right.
So,
right.
And these are people who ran on a platform of repealing and replacing Obamacare. So yes, that's true. And now the third item which people bring up.
So I hear there's a lot of different things I hear, but if we're going to pick one, it would be immigration, and the role that's playing in the country. Much like you brought up earlier, we have an incentive model that encourages illegal, and then it makes it more difficult to have legal because of the bureaucracy. And I'll give you an example about in Wisconsin here in particular. Agriculture and dairy, right? So this is a big dairy state.
Right.
Well, dairy requires year-round work. At the federal level, we don't have any visa programs designed for year-round temporary type labor to support that industry. We have the seasonal for those that are coming here to work with the seasonal fruits and vegetables and then head back. But as far as a dairy farm, as an example, we have nothing on the books to support them. So that's something that we need to address.
So now, do you think that those jobs might be more? Why wouldn't those jobs be more attracted to the American citizen? That's kind of what I want to understand. Is why would Americans not want to take those jobs? Do you know what the solution might be there? Because it just seems to me that there are a lot of unemployed people in America.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I tell you, here in Wisconsin, this economy is going really well right now. They got about 3% unemployment, which is near full employment. I don't think it get much lower than that. So the governor here and the legislature have done a great job of putting an environment in place to allow individual freedom to prosper.
But you still do have a margin there. So, when I think of things, I think of the big picture in jobs. We should always look to America first and ensuring that Americans are to work. I mean, are there programs that maybe individuals who are unemployed could work in those industries and use a balance of those types of workers or job seekers, as well as visa holders for year-round type positions? I mean, there has to be a balance where if we have this, I look at it this way, if we have this open door year-round visa system, then why would we even just not have them here, permanently? It's kind of a quandary to me. So,
no, that's a good point. So, as far as why we're not able to fill certain jobs, I don't know that. I don't have the answer to that.
Right.
What I do know is just from the conversations that we've had here locally the last several months on different challenges that business owners are facing and others, and that's one of the things that
seems very real. I mean, what you're expressing to me is that's a real challenge for them to find workers that are Wisconsin residents to take those jobs. So, there has to be a solution because the work still needs done. Right. So, I would look to you though to find some real substantive solutions, because America First is important, and 3% is still 3% too high. But I can go on and on that one. So I have to ask you one last question. How old is your little baby now?
Let's see. He'll be 21 months on Saturday.
Almost 2, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So you're really, you're a family man. You're doing this for you and for her future, right? Or is it
baby boy? No,
baby
it's a little
boy.
Yeah, baby boy. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
You're doing this for his future. That's wonderful. Now, Nick, can you go ahead really quick? Tell us your name. Tell us just your platform in like 30 seconds, and also where people can find out information about your campaign. I think it's important that people contribute time, talent, and treasure if they're able.
Sure. So my name is Nick Polce. That's spelled police without the I. Very quickly, small business owner, U.S. Army Green Beret combat veteran, father and husband. Well, a couple things. You don't go to Washington to spend a career. I think they're spending way too much money. We need to cut it. There's a lot of things we can do to increase healthcare access and drive down costs. Absolutely. And we got to secure the borders.
Absolutely.
Now, you can find our stuff at nickpolceforcongress.com. That's, again, police without the I is how you spell my last name. Twitter, at Nick, the letter or the number 4 house. And then Facebook is Nick Polce for Congress.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Nick, for being on the Erin Cruz Show. We really appreciate it. And after you win that primary, we will have you on again, and I'm going to expect an answer about that 3% unemployment. We need solutions. They might be a tough conversation, but the conversation has to happen, and I'm just so glad that you're willing to do it, do the work.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Pleasure being on your show.
God bless you, Nick.
To hear more and to learn more on how you can make an impact or about the Erin Cruz Show, visit us online at erincruz.com. That's ERINCRUZ.com.